12. Even with some years and miles on it, the Range Rover Evoque was a very flashy car. True, the Evoque was, as the brochures put it with heavy tact, the entry-level Land Rover model, and there was no pretending a 6-year-old vehicle had come straight out of the showroom. But for someone wanting to make a statement in a college town, a Range Rover, age or model be damned, could hardly be improved upon. And so, on the afternoon of November 11th, when Kaylee pulled up to the white front door of 1122 King Road at the wheel of her newly leased silver 2016 Evoque, who could blame her if she felt it was the ideal way to make an entrance? She was moving on from her college days and doing it in style. This was the surprise she had been so eager to share with Maddie, and by all accounts, the car caused quite a stir. And not just with her best friend, but with the other girls, too. It struck them as astonishing that a roommate, although she spent most of her time up in Coeur d'Alene, Kaylee had kept her third-floor room through graduation in December, had been able to handle the cost of such an extravagance. The down payment? The monthly lease? Those were serious, real-world bills. And staring enviously at the spiffy silver-gray car, they might very well have feared a gulf larger than the 85 miles between Moscow and Coeur d'Alene had opened up between Kaylee and them. They needn't have worried. It was just like old times. Most weekends in Moscow during the fall term played out with the rhythm of a 3-day party, and this was even more so when there was a football game at Kibbe Dome. On Saturday, the Vandals would be playing their first home game of what so far had proven to be a surprisingly successful season. The prospect of a win against UC Davis and an invitation down the road to the division championship playoffs helped fuel the upbeat mood. For the residents of King Road, it was a time for both dressing up and going out. On Friday night, Kaylee tagged along as Dylan's +1 to the Pi Phi formal. Kaylee, although an Alpha Phi, would have known just about everyone at the gathering and would have had no trouble comfortably fitting in. She was PPB, as the appreciative Greek Row shorthand put it, pretty, popular, and blonde. And later the roommates returned home and no doubt talked late into the night as only friends without secret scan. By all accounts, the next day got off to a late start. It was the weekend, and once the morning coffee had worked its restorative magic, someone had an inspired idea. Who knows when we'll all be together again? The instigator, destined to be forever anonymous, challenged. We should preserve the moment. Take a photo. In the bright autumnal light, the roommates all lined up on the narrow porch at the back of the house in a shoulder-to-shoulder row. At each end of the row, as if bookends to the larger drama that was already taking its inevitable shape, were Dylan and Bethany. While at center stage, directly in the camera's eye, were the other four. Little Maddie was balanced on Kaylee's shoulders, blonde on blonde, united and dependent on each other. Once again, a single hyphenated unit, Kaylee-Maddie. Standing next to them, a head taller, was a tousled-haired Ethan grinning his engaging jack-o'-lantern smile. His left arm was crooked possessively and protectively around Xana, both of their dark outfits outliers to the faded denims all the others were wearing. Later that evening, at 8:57 to be precise, Kaylee posted the photo on her Instagram account. One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day. The football game was over. The Vandals had lost badly, but now it was evening and the weekend nevertheless rolled merrily along. Ethan, the dutiful triplet, was his sister's date at Kappa Alpha Theta's Betty Dance. This was the annual fall formal celebrated to honor Betty Locke Hamilton, one of the sorority's founders. Yet because back in 1867 Betty had established a dry sorority and the harsh prohibition still ruled more than a century later, the festivities ended mercifully early so that the young people could head out to get a drink. Or 3. For starters. Ethan, looking debonair in his dark suit jacket and a white shirt rakishly unbuttoned in a deep V, had left the formal by 8 p.m. to pick up Xana. An hour later, they were heading up the hill from the house on King Road to Ethan's frat. At Sigma Chi, it wouldn't be a problem that both of them, just 20, were under the state's legal drinking age, and they hurried because they were late. No matter what the time, people liked to snigger, at Sigma Chi the party had already started the night before. As for Kaylee and Maddie, they had their own plans for the evening. At just after 10, a cab picked them up at the house, and their destination, all things considered, seemed a strange choice. Moscow offered any number of bars. Head downtown and you could make a pleasant time of it in Mingles or the Dirty Goat or John's Alley, to cite just a few. On a football Saturday night, any of them would be packed elbow to elbow with students and hard-drinking locals. But Kaylee and Maddie had their hearts set on going to the corner club on the northern outskirts of Main Street. Arguably, the attraction was the club itself. It was a rah-rah sports bar, a place where, regardless of the season, a game would always be on one of the TVs. And its tide of Vandals football ran deep. Every year, the homecoming king and queen would hoist themselves up onto the tin-plated bar and burst into the college's fight song. Came a tribe from the north, brave and bold, bearing banners of silver and gold. It seemed, therefore, an appropriate place to drown sorrows over the disheartening Vandals' loss. And there were always the club's famous tub cups, brimming with a hefty 30 ounces of beer. A few of those might take the sting out of any loss on the field. Another selling point? The club was a safe place, a hallmark that would not have been overlooked by two attractive women going out on their own on a Saturday night. The bartenders and the locals took a paternalistic view toward the co-eds. Kaylee and Maddie wouldn't have had to worry about getting hit on by obnoxious jocks or entitled frat boys. All they'd have to do, and it had in fact been demonstrated to them with impressive efficacy in the past, would be to let any of the staff know that some guy was creeping them out, and a giant's arm would be placed with an unmistakable force around the offender's shoulder as he was ushered out the metal front door and into the street. Looking at things that way, the corner club would have been a logical, even a prudent choice for the two women. Except it wasn't. There was one additional detail that in any rational world should have made the bar decidedly off-limits. All weekend, Kaylee had been insisting it was permanently over between Jack Decor and her. And if anyone had the temerity to suggest otherwise, Kaylee would shoot back with an unwavering certitude. This is it, she had repeatedly vowed. Yet if that was truly the unalterable state of their union, then Kaylee would have been wise not to go into the club even if it were the only bar in town. For on a Saturday night, the bartender was certain to be Adam Lotta. He was a hunky 6'5" basketball player and a Delt. But most significantly, he was Jack Decor's roommate, frat brother, and best buddy. With Adam behind the bar, it was a sure thing that Jack would be there drinking too. Which meant her heading out to the corner club made no sense. Unless, of course, as it was later suggested by those who knew her well, a considerable motivating factor in her decision to return to Moscow for the weekend had been to reconnect with Jack. Even if Kaylee wouldn't admit it to herself. Still, once the two girls joined the swirl of drinkers crowded into the club, Kaylee did her best to stick to her guns. The bar was jammed, and so it was easy to keep her distance from Jack. They shared a few words, and in the judgment of those who had witnessed the exchanges, they seemed little more than polite, if not downright terse. Maddie, though, had apparently seen through all her best friend's self-deceptions. She spent a large part of the evening huddled at the bar with Lotta, no doubt probing his assessment of where things truly stood between Kaylee and Jack. And who could blame her if she was set on seeing her friend happy? Then it was past 1 a.m., closer to 1:30 by some accounts, and, a little worse for drink but happily so, the two young women left the bar. The November night was clear, and frosty and full of stars, yet they walked down Main Street as though oblivious to the cold. Kaylee's jeans were fashionably ripped at the knees, and she wore only a sweatshirt for warmth. Maddie, in frayed jeans and a pink top that stopped well above her navel and left a generous amount of flesh exposed, had on a black zippered jacket, several sizes too big. The sleeves nearly reached her knees. She wore it unzipped, playfully flopping the absurd long sleeves about as if she were a bird testing her wings before taking to flight. Following behind them at a decorous distance was Jack Showalter. He was someone they knew from around campus, and when they left the bar, he had tagged along. Perhaps they thought it was a protective gesture, an acquaintance keeping a watchful eye as they sauntered down Main Street in the sharp, dark night. Or maybe they found his trailing them an annoyance. Regardless, the two women paid him no mind. Kaylee's thoughts were elsewhere. "Maddie, what did you say to Adam?" she demanded. It was as if she feared her friend had been probing the bartender about Jack Decor. "Like, I told Adam everything," Maddie conceded. That seemed a sufficient explanation. At once, Kaylee stopped delving into such raw territory. And besides, she had her pride, and Showalter was lurking. By now they had made their way to the grub truck. Parked kitty-corner to Main Street, the truck provided the tipsy college kids with the opportunity to soak up a bit of the evening's alcohol with a variety of leaden mac and cheese dishes or a berry Nutella cheesecake burrito. Carbonara, Kaylee ordered as if she were mouthing a tongue twister. Alcohol could make the simplest of things a struggle. They puffed clouds of frosted breath into each other's faces as they waited for the food they'd share. Maddie looked very small inside the big black coat. Abruptly, she turned toward Showalter. His hood was now pulled over the ball cap on his head, and he stood in the shadows talking quietly to another guy. "Fuck you," Maddie declared. She might have been talking to Showalter, or she might have been sharing her inebriated resentment about nothing in particular. At last the food came, and Kaylee, knowing it would be a foolishness to walk the mile or so back to King Road in the bitter cold, had called the number the sororities had previously distributed to hire late-night rides. Without a word to any of the crowd of kids hovering by the food truck, they got into the car and went home. It was 2 a.m., and the house was full. Everyone had come home. Dylan and Bethany had been the first to return. They had gotten back around midnight and now were in their rooms, the doors closed. Xana and Ethan had arrived at about 1:45 a.m. Their footsteps in tandem, they had trudged down the hill from Sigma Chi, walked through the crumpled cans of Keystone beer scattered across the driveway, and settled into Xana's room on the second floor. Kaylee had decided to crash in Maddie's room. Murphy was curled up in the bedroom across the hall. Unable to sleep, Kaylee's mind refused to rest. Or was it her heart? Had she realized at the end of a long day that all her scrupulously correct behavior at the corner club was worth nothing? No, less than nothing. She called Jack at 2:26 a.m. He didn't answer, and within 30 minutes she had called another 6 times. All the calls went straight to voicemail. Then, full of a newfound urgency, had she recruited Maddie to reach out to Jack to help make things right? All that is definitively known is that Maddie, once Kaylee had given up, had also tried to phone Jack. 3 times in rapid succession. But she, too, had no success. Her attempts went unanswered. And so by 3 a.m., assuredly frustrated, they were at last ready to call it a day. Xana, though, was not ready for bed. Earlier, at around midnight, she had called her dad to let him know that she and Ethan would be leaving the party soon and heading home. But once back in her room with Ethan, she was still revved up. She scrolled through TikTok, then she decided she was hungry. She placed a DoorDash order for a cheeseburger and fries from Burger King. The driver had to make the trip to King Road from across the state line in Pullman, 10 miles or so away. But at 4 a.m., he knocked on the front door and handed Xana a brown paper bag containing her order. She carried it upstairs. And then the night came falling down, with a madness all of its own.